Welcome back to the California Conversation. I'm Tess Abraham. Today, I want to step back from the news cycle because, as you know, we are in an election year. And that means that in the coming weeks and months, we are going to have to talk a lot about candidates for governor, propositions that are going to be on the ballot, polling, and where that is standing as we get closer and closer to November. And then, of course, just the state of our state as we get ready to elect a new governor in order to lead us. But before we get into all of that, before we talk about all of what is to come over the next several months, there's something very important that I want to take time ahead of all of that to stop and to acknowledge. And that is that there is a consensus among many people that I have had the wonderful privilege of being able to talk to and chat with that politics simply are overwhelming, that it is really hard when you look around you and politics seem depressing or they seem divisive. It seems like there's drama and things are combative all of the time. And it can just be so draining to have to engage with that. It can be a lot of work to stay informed on what's really going on and trying to parse out what's true and untrue. And so because of that, many people feel like it is the wiser choice to just disengage entirely. And so I want to stop and I want to say, I hear that. I hear that. That is a very real concern, especially when you have a life to live. You have a job that you have to work, and you might have children that you are raising at home. You have other responsibilities. And so you might feel already stretched to your limit. You might already feel like there's just so much going on and that you can't take on more in your mental load. And so on top of that, to add in something that you either don't understand a lot about or that just seems like it has so much conflict and controversy centered around it, can just feel unsustainable. And so I don't want to ignore the fact that this is a very real barrier, that it can be anxiety inducing if you're trying to raise children at home to hear about other people's children being murdered by illegal immigrants. That would cause so much anxiety. Or if you're trying to be faithful in your own job, it can feel depressing to hear about a potential recession, the state of our economy, and potentially a very bleak job market that is out there. Or if you're trying to get to know new people, it can feel hard if you're really engaged and involved with politics to not let that become a barrier, to not let that be a lens through which you view every person. And so I understand, and I don't want to downplay that. If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel anxious, if you feel like politics does not fit into your life, then I want to speak directly to you today. Because here's the thing, I believe that everyone, every American should be informed about and engaged in the politics that shape their life, that shape the world around them. But I recognize that just preaching about the principled necessity of engaging in politics does not practically help those who feel burdened by it. And so even though I could give you a diatribe on why you should engage in politics as a Californian, as an American, and as a Christian, and I have done that in the past, today I just want to stop and be very practical with you, not to answer the question of why should you engage, but more so, how can you engage in politics and how can you do so without losing your mind? I really hope that today is just helpful. I just want to speak to you from the heart and try to help reframe what it actually means to be an American in a way that is sustainable for all of us to do. And if you know anyone who is overwhelmed by politics, if you know people who say, I'm not political, I don't want to get involved in that, please share this with them because I genuinely want every single person to feel empowered to elect leaders that are going to represent their interests, empowered to know what their government is doing and to have their voices heard. But we can't get there if we all are too overwhelmed to even take the first step. But before we get into it, please like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you can stay updated on all things California politics. And if you want more information, if you want these practical tips that I'll be sharing to be boiled down for you easily, then you should check out the corresponding article on my website, which is linked below. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to step back and reframe, because I believe that there are a few misconceptions about what it means to engage in politics that act as a barrier for people to even take that first step into understanding what is going on with their government. And so what does it mean to engage, and what does it not mean to engage? The first misconception that I think is pretty typical is that to engage in politics, it means that you must engage extensively with social media. And this is something I think is fairly obvious that we see not just in my generation of Gen Z, but also in the generation before me. And data and studies backs this up. Over 50 to 85% of Gen Z in the United States use social media as their main source of news, with over half of them using it for daily updates on news, which is just wild. It doesn't surprise me, but that is the direction that our society and our culture has really shifted over the years, is now moving toward, if you go on social media, there is a lot of political content. That is how a lot of people get the news out about political content. And so people are just using that as their main news outlet. But the problem is that consuming political content online and reacting to it there, whether in comment sections or in posting or in arguing on social media, is not the same as actually participating in politics. Why? Well, that's because social media gives you the feeling of engagement. It gives kind of this faux engagement world without having any of the positive aspects or the things that actually make political engagement meaningful. And what I mean by that is that social media is fast, it is emotional, and it is constant. And so when you understand, the algorithms want your attention. Companies want you to stay on their apps. They want you to keep watching, keep reading, keep interacting. And so they are going to feed you more and more of what they think is going to grab your attention. Then that is often not going to be policy completely broken down for you in a very thoughtful manner. It's just going to be things that get quick reactions and that get people riled up. That's very different from actually taking the time to know what is going on beyond the headlines in politics, and then to break down what certain bills actually mean, what policy outcomes would actually do in your communities, and what leaders would serve you best. In real life, though, actually engaging politically is often slower. It is more methodical. It is far less visible than what we see on social media. And it ties back into doing that hard work of actually understanding, of using logic and reasoning to break down what's going on. And so what we try to do here on a week-to-week basis is say, okay, California has introduced this bill. Let's see who supports it. Let's see who opposes it, what is being said about it. And then let's break down what the actual implications of that bill would be. That's a lot slower and gets a lot less clicks than just posting some sort of headline for people to quickly react to. And so in that way, just engaging with social media isn't actually being informed about politics. It's just being informed about what most people are talking about in politics today. But other bills and other more important topics completely go under the radar and are not what are being talked about or being exposed on social media. And so social media is a good tool. I don't want you to think that it is bad or that it's wrong to post political content or that it's always just rage baiting. I don't believe that. I have used it in the past. I love being able to share about the podcast. But at the same time, we just have to recognize it is one tool in our arsenal for how we are going to start to engage in politics, but it's not the end all be all. And it's definitely not to say that just because you're on X means that you are politically engaged. And so on the flip side, I also want you to hear that social media is not a requirement in order to engage in politics. I know several people who choose not to be on social media or who severely limit and restrict what they do, how often they are on social media. And I still believe that they can fully participate in politics that are going on around them. It is not mandatory that you be on Instagram in order for you to know about local elections, in order for you to know who you are going to vote for, and in order for you to be up on the issues of the day. The second misconception is that to be informed and to engage in politics, you need to be watching hours and hours of news and conducting hours of researching. And so this is another one that I've heard is people saying, I just don't have the time or the bandwidth or the capacity to be researching so many issues, or the news causes me anxiety. And so I don't like to watch the news. I don't like to hear about the latest cases of crime that are going on in my city. It is anxiety inducing. And so I just cannot be engaged in politics because I don't like those aspects. And I get it. I feel the same pressure. I think that we feel this pressure to be kept up on every single thing. We like every breaking news item. We think that we need to know about it in order to be informed. But I would just challenge that to say that being informed doesn't actually require constant consumption. And this really makes me think of COVID, because in 2020, when we were all locked down and had to stay home, we used to watch the Today Show every morning. And every morning they'd go on there and be like, oh, the deaths are rising. Here's the number. Watch the ticker go up. And then they would show the same stories of people like doing dances on social media, whatnot. And after a while, it just became kind of depressing. It's like every day we have this ritual of having to log onto the news and see pretty much the same news, which is that COVID is raging. No one really knows what to do about it. And we're just all locked in order to stay at home. And so when we step back and think about that, we realize the news is similar to social media in that it is a tool. It should be used at our disposal. The news is great for being able to break stories. It's great to be able to try to understand what is going on, see some headlines, but you should not be, and you don't have to be watching it 24/7. You don't have to have it on in order to be informed. It's just one outlet for where you can get some information, but it is not going to be comprehensive, and it is not going to do deeper dives into topics. The best way to actually be informed is to work with a small amount of intentional information. And so this means that you will be reading a few well-reported articles by authors who you trust and have a good track record on how they report. It means listening to a thoughtful podcast that is talking about topics that are relevant to you and that is breaking it down in a way that is actually informative and helpful for you to be able to form your own opinions. And it also might mean checking in on news developments and things going on in the world once per week instead of every single day or multiple times a day on social media. It's setting aside that time that, again, is going to be intentional. And I think that can help curb that feeling of just overwhelming anxiety because of information overload. That's completely understandable. We are just being fed so much information day after day that really isn't necessary to our lives and that isn't going to help us to actually really engage intentionally. And so we have to make sure that when you are reading things, when you are reading about the news or keeping up on current events, that you are doing that in a manner where you are very aware of it and you're in the right headspace for it. And then when you just go about the rest of your day, you don't need to be bombarded by information after information after information that leaves you feeling overwhelmed and burnt out. So if you feel overwhelmed by the news or by social media, please hear me when I say you do not need to be following the news all day, every day in order to be an informed citizen. And actually, I think that you will be better informed and you will be better equipped to engage in politics if you limit that and if you are not chronically online, because then you have the bandwidth and the capacity and the capability to understand issues more clearly and cut out the rest of the noise that sort of infiltrates along with the important topics. So that's what it does not mean to engage in politics. But what do I mean when I say we should be engaged in politics? I believe that it is having a basic understanding of issues that directly affect yourself, your city, your state, and then your country. And so it's sort of this starting small and inward and then moving outward as you go. It's having enough information and enough of an understanding of the issues of the day to be able to form thoughtful opinions on them and to be able to come to conclusions on the policies that are going to directly affect your life and the lives of the people directly around you. And we see that there is a huge lack of this in society today, which frustrates me to no end, because we see, especially in places like California, that people just show up to vote and they vote based on either who their parents have always voted for, based on who their friends are voting for, based on who the latest celebrity told them to vote for, based on just political party, if they will always vote one way. That is not being informed. That is not actually engaging with the system, because instead you are just showing up to check a box, but you have no idea what you are voting for. You have no idea what the real outcomes of the policies you're enacting and the leaders you're putting in place are actually going to be doing. And so I want to see more people ask harder questions of the people in leadership over them. But to do that, they have to have a basic level of information, a basic understanding of the issues that those leaders speak to. And so if you start to know more about immigration, more about crime, more about basic economics and how they work, then you start to question, okay, these policies that are being put in place by someone like Gavin Newsom, those don't seem like they're going to be effective, because I have researched and studied and know that on those topics that the things that he is doing, like raising minimum wage, is actually counteractive to what we want to do, aka lower cost of living. And so you start to ask questions of your leaders, but people aren't even at that point because they are not having that basic level of understanding in order to realize the outcomes of the policies that are going to affect their lives. People are just going off of instinct or going off of what they have always done. And that is not being informed. And so I see political engagement not about constant consumption of news or constant commentary on politics or the things that are going on, but really about intentional participation, understanding what role you are playing, understanding what your vote really does, reaching out to your representatives because you don't want to see certain outcomes take place, or you do want to see certain outcomes of another bill that you're advocating for. That kind of participation is very deliberate. It is very behind the scenes. It's not very flashy. And so that is what I think it actually means. And when you participate that way, when it's incredibly intentional and it's less about headlines and it is more about making thoughtful, informed decisions, then I hope that it is less likely to actually overwhelm you and take over all of your mental space. So I want to get really, really practical, because I hope that that sets the stage on what politics is not and what politics is. But beyond that, how are we going to go about that? And so I want to share just a few quick things that I do in my own life to keep myself from getting overwhelmed with politics. The first thing that I would say is set boundaries. You do this with every other area of your life. As human beings, there is nothing that we can do 100% of the time without burning out on it or getting overwhelmed by it. It's just not possible. We need breaks from things. We need variety and to be able to mix it up. And the same is true with politics. And so if you think about work, I would assume that most of you are not working late at the office every single night of every single week, especially if you have a family at home who relies on you. If you are doing that, it would be clear to see that work has completely taken over your life and you are likely going to burn out on it. And so you have designated times where you need to do your job and do it well. And then you have other times where you are not working, you're not thinking about work, you're not really talking about work in a manner of what you would be doing at the office. The same is true with politics. Set aside time, set aside boundaries where you are not going to be thinking about, talking about, reading about, or doing anything related to politics. You can have times where you are going to listen to a podcast that you really like. You can even choose days of the week and say, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm going to listen to my political podcasts that I like. And then the other days of the week, I am not. I'm going to take a break. So set your boundaries. That's going to look different for every person. That's going to look different for your life. But just understand that you don't need to be immersed in it 24/7, and it's probably healthier for you if you are not. I have a few personal examples of things that I do. I severely limit my social media usage. That's because social media had been a really big problem for me in the past. My X and my Instagram accounts are basically just political commentary because I follow a lot of people in politics on those accounts. So when I open up X, it is just straight news. And it's usually not the great side of politics. It's more the depressing or ugly side of politics. And so I use something called the Brick. This is not an ad for this product, but it's just where you tap your phone and it basically turns your phone into a brick, and you can only use certain apps that you allow yourself to use. And so my phone is bricked like 90% of every day, which means that I actually go long stretches. I'll go 72 hours without unbricking, which means I'm not looking at social media at all in those spans of time. And that has been so helpful for my mental health to not be constantly thinking about the world, constantly reading what libs of TikTok is posting about something that someone is doing that's crazy. And so that's what I do. I like to limit my time on my phone and limit my time on any sort of outlet that is going to be primarily news driven, which for me is social media. And so setting boundaries means that politics can continue to be something that you engage with very intentionally rather than just engaging with it every time you end up looking at your phone. And so that prevents it from being something that consumes your entire day. So I would start there of set some clear boundaries for yourself. Second, pay attention to your capacity and try to avoid an all or nothing mindset. We have this tendency as people, I know I have this tendency where you get really excited about something or really into something and it becomes something you want to do every single day or you want to do a lot of it. And I think we're very prone to doing that with politics where you can get interested or involved in something and suddenly you're listening to these podcasts every day or you're reading about the news every day, a lot of times per day. You burn out and then you end up doing nothing. And that helps no one. And so really, I think what you need to do is take a good stock of what your capacity is, see what you are able to incorporate into your weekly routine or your normal life, and then to just build that muscle over time of having slow consistency with political engagement. So that might mean that you pick one podcast, maybe this show, and you commit to saying, I am going to listen to that every week to be informed on the issues in California, but that is all that I have capacity to do. That's great. Start with building that muscle. And then you might grow from there. And there are going to be seasons. There's going to be seasons where you can take on more, you have more capacity, and so you're going to be able to do more. Then there are going to be seasons where you can do less, and so you bring it back. But what you want to avoid is doing so much that you burn out or pulling back so far that you're doing nothing. Neither of those extremes is helpful. And so the way to avoid the extremes is to listen to your own signals and to actually follow them. So for me personally, a signal that I am starting to burn out is when I get really pessimistic about the state of the world. I get really depressed about the state of California and start thinking we just need to move. And I have told my husband on many occasions, I feel like I'm just shouting into the void and nobody is listening to me. It's not doing anything. I'm not doing anything important. And so when I start to feel that way, I realize, I'm in dangerous territory. I need to step back. I need to do something that re-energizes me or recharges me. I need to go outside and touch some grass. I need to hang out with some friends. And then I need to circle back and start to engage in small ways again. That keeps me from saying, I quit. I'm not doing politics at all anymore. But it also keeps me from getting so far into it that I'm just so overwhelmed and losing my mind. So fight that tendency to disengage. It is strong. It is especially strong when there's a lot in the news cycle that's very depressing. Fight against it and stay informed even in little ways that you can. Third, do not engage in politics alone. You don't have to do this alone. You can ask for help. And you do that by finding good resources and finding good voices to listen to. This starts to combat that idea that being informed about politics requires you to do a bunch of research. It's true that you need to use your own thinking. You can't outsource your critical thinking to other people. You need to be discerning about the things that you intake, but you can rely on people who are in politics a lot more than you, who have studied it for longer, and who do this more as of a job or a more long-term hobby, who can break things down for you because they have put the time into actually learning about them. And so if you're a busy mom and you just don't have the bandwidth to understand the economic implications of a new affordable housing bill that goes into place in California, find a podcast that does, or find a good book about economics to start with, or read a few helpful articles and then talk to a friend about it. You are not in this alone. You don't have to spend hours and hours studying and researching as though you're in college in order to be engaged in politics. And so I wanted to share a few good resources with you, just of what I listen to that might be helpful. They might totally not be helpful. That's fine. And if you have good resources that you like as well for being engaged in politics, please drop those in the comments below. I'm sure they'll be very helpful for other people watching this episode. Personally, I love Allie Beth Stuckey. She has a podcast called Relatable. She is a Christian. She talks about national politics and all of the issues surrounding national politics from a Christian perspective. Her latest book, Toxic Empathy, is fantastic, and I recommend that every single person read it. And so if you have questions on any single topic, you can type that topic into the Apple Podcast or Spotify search bar and also type in Relatable, and episodes will pop up for you where she breaks those down. And so she is an incredible resource and a great place to start, especially for Christian women. Now, outside of that, if you want quick updates on news, if you just want 10 to 15-minute episodes per day just to hear about major developments going on in the world, Morning Wire is a fantastic podcast. My husband listens to this every morning. I hear it playing in the shower when he wakes up in the morning, and it really does a great job of just breaking down the facts. They don't give really too much analysis or bias on it. They are just breaking down for you of what is going on in the world, what is going on in our country, and what you should be aware of. And it's very short. So that is a fantastic resource. Along that same theme, if you want to understand more complex political issues, I personally really love Ben Shapiro. I think that he has great wisdom to share when it comes to breaking down foreign policy, when it comes to economic policy, when it comes to just the state of the laws that are going on in our country. I know people have very mixed opinions on how fast he speaks or on different aspects, but I have found Ben to be incredibly intelligent and a great resource when it comes to understanding more about the political sphere. And if none of those are your cup of tea, Mohler is a fantastic Christian resource as well. He does the briefing. I believe that it is daily or multiple times per week. And I know many friends who listen to his content as well. And honestly, there are so many other great resources, but those are the main ones that I have found helpful. And so check them out if you have absolutely no idea where to start. And again, drop any resources in the comments that you might have. And then I want to challenge you right here. This show, let it be a resource for you. I put out one episode per week. I try to keep them under 30 minutes. I know that I break that rule a lot, but it is once a week where you are getting informed on a new piece of something that is happening in California. And so commit today that you are going to listen every single week. You're just going to tune in for that one day a week in order to stay up to date on what's going on in your state. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the most valuable resource that I have found in my own life is actually conversations with other people who are interested in and strong on politics. The Bible says that iron sharpens iron. I have found that to be so true. It is incredibly helpful to have a community of like-minded people, whether that is like-minded in your religion or like-minded just in your politics, who can help to push you, who can help to ask questions about your thinking, who can challenge your line of thought, and who can force you to defend your positions as well as come alongside you in refining them. I think that that is just critical, and we all need that in life, to not just listen to people on the internet who we don't know, but to also be engaging with it with real people around us. And the greatest place to start for all of that is a good local church. And so I will link some good church finders below in the description for you if you need help finding that as well. Fourth, view engaging in politics as a gradual process and not an overnight one. Would you believe me if I told you that back in 2020, I was not politically involved at all? I voted in the election and then I didn't even watch for what the outcomes were. I didn't really care that much. Obviously, I knew it was important, but I wasn't into politics the way that I am today. And so it has taken me years now to come to this point where I have a very podcast on political topics. And with that, it's just in California. So it takes time. You're not expected to just overnight understand everything that there is to know about different policies. It's going to be slow. And so I would say pick a few topics that you're interested in and then just build from there. If you want to understand more about economics, read Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell, and so on with any other topic. You can find a good book there where you can learn more about policy implications, or you can find a good podcast to break down what the implications will be, and you just start building from there. And you will be surprised at how quickly you start to see patterns and trends and pick up on things and start to understand what's going on. But don't feel pressure to just understand that overnight, which really leads into my fifth tip, which is to start with your sphere of influence. You want to look at the things that are directly affecting your life first, because that's what you need to have the most say in. And so you don't need to fully understand our relationship with China and the future of what China is doing, or what's going on with the war in Ukraine and if we should support them or not. You don't even need to understand all of that today. Yes, those things are important, but start with your community. If you're a parent, start with trying to understand the laws that actually affect your child's upbringing, their education, their health, and your rights in order to parent them. If you want to try to own a home, try to understand the laws in your state around property taxes, around economic policy that make that goal either seem attainable or seem really out of reach. Just look around you and think, what are the things that affect me, and start from there. And you eventually will start to work more outward. That's honestly why I talk about California politics. I feel like there is a wealth of resources, information on national politics, but there's not as much just specifically about our state. And I care about my state. I care about my community. I care about the people around me. And so I want to start with my sphere of influence first and then start to work outward. And honestly, within that, please remember that you have the freedom to have genuine interests in some topics and lack of interest in other topics. You don't have to be equally as excited or passionate about every single thing in politics. Personally, I love economics. I love talking about economic policy, breaking down the budget. I love talking about taxes. I have quite a few episodes recently on taxes, so I have to rein myself in with that. I don't like talking about healthcare. I really don't love covering education. Those are topics that just don't invigorate me. So I spend less time on them. They're important. They're very important. And so I need to know enough to make informed decisions, but I don't have to put all of my energy into them. And so feel the freedom to find the things that you love, that you are passionate about, that affect you or maybe affect the person next to you, and go hard after becoming an expert in those things while keeping other things that drain you a little bit more on the back burner. And lastly, and most importantly, keep perspective on the things that matter. At the end of the day, we are only going to make change politically insofar as God allows us to. And so I am a Christian. That shapes my entire worldview, that shapes my entire life. And really, we see that while our actions definitely matter, they matter. That's why I engage in politics. God uses ordinary people to bring about change. We also see that we surrender all of our efforts to Him. We realize that we're not in control. We are incredibly out of control when it comes to being able to change everything around us. And so I rest my head on the pillow of the sovereignty of God every single night. I do all of these efforts, yes, to change my state, but ultimately, I am okay come win or come lose because I know that there is someone greater than me who is in control. And so it might seem like politics is a very big part of my life, and it's fair to say it's a big part of my life, but it's not my entire life. I would really say that church is my life. I spend so much time with my husband serving in many ministries at our church. We try to spend time during the week meeting with families from our church and in our community to try to encourage one another. We spend time going to Bible study every single week. And then beyond that, I study the Bible with two separate groups of dear friends from my church every other week. And so every week I am reading through passages of scripture. I am studying them with commentaries, and then I am sitting down with friends to go over what we have learned and to be held accountable to one another. And so really that's just me saying I'm keeping the main thing, that while politics are very important and I do really love talking about and researching them, that at the end of the day, politics are not my God. They're not my entire sphere. And so if you put politics in the center of your life, I think that you will burn out. I do think that it will be overwhelming and frustrating when you cannot make change. But when you realize that there's someone greater than you who you surrender all of your efforts to, you become free to just be faithful, to just do what you can, and to trust that there is one with a better plan who sees further than us and who is working all things out for our good and for His own glory. Your faith should inform your politics. It should help guide how you engage with it, but it ultimately will guard you from being consumed by it. So prepare yourself for this election season. I know that was a lot, but those are just some practical tips that I have found helpful, and I hope that they are helpful to you as well. And if there is one thing that you take away from this, let it be this: just don't give up. Just keep trying. I know that it can be frustrating. There are going to be seasons where it's a little bit more work, and then seasons where it doesn't feel as much work. Just keep showing up. Move off of principle in those moments, because there are going to be moments where our emotions fail us. There are going to be times when it's really exciting and fun, and then there are going to be times where it's a little bit harder and you're a little bit more burnt out. Operate off the principle of knowing that the work you're doing is important. Being informed is important. It is so vital for protecting our democracy. And we want to do that. And that's because we know America and California specifically are worth fighting for. And if we don't fight for them, if we just completely disengage, that affects not only ourselves, but it affects the people around us. It affects our children. It affects our communities. It affects our neighbors. And so we must continue finding ways, showing up to find what's going to work to keep us engaged in the very democracy that we have a role in upholding and defending. I want to leave you with the words of Jeremiah 29. It says, quote, "This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. And seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper." This is the responsibility given to us by God to seek the good of those around us. He will give us the grace to do it, but we must be faithful to try. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope it was practically helpful for you as you think about how to navigate politics and life in our state. Please spread this episode, share it with others who you think might have the same feeling of being overwhelmed in politics or just unsure of how to practically engage with it. And if you love this show, please spread the word and share it with friends, family, and fellow Californians. And I will see you back here next week for another episode of the California Conversation.